Hello world. This is going to be a very basic introduction to HTML and CSS. I'm going to show you how to get an HTML file into your browser and just kind of write a few quick and dirty tags to just kind of explore the syntax. This is assuming you have basically no experience with HTML or CSS. Okay, so to get a HTML file in our browser, we need a program like a code editor that can create the HTML files. Sublime Text 3 will work well, so go ahead and download that if you need to. I already have it set up, so let's get started. I would always recommend organizing your files into a folder, all your website files into a folder. So go ahead and create a folder. I made one here on my desktop. We want to import this folder into Sublime Text just to kind of get our environment set up. So I can navigate to my desktop, find my folder. I just named it Site. So this is a good location to put all our files. We'll create a new file. Sublime Text just gives you a new tab here and doesn't save it. We want to Control S to save it, to give it a name. Page.html will be fine. The 8.html is important that you don't make any typos there, because that's what defines this as an HTML file. And so you see the file appears over here in the folder as well. We need to be in Windows to be able to right click it and say open with Google Chrome to get the file in the browser. And there we go. That's our first web page. We can say hello world, and nothing happens. You need to refresh the browser every time you make a change, because the browser has no idea that the source, the underlying file, has changed, and so it needs to go back and re-request that file. So if ever you make a change and you're just kind of looking, waiting for that change to happen, it won't. You need to refresh the browser first. So I have both of these things zoomed way in. The text is a lot larger than it should be, both in the browser and the text editor, just for visibility's sake. But there we go, our first web page. Now what HTML lets us do is add tags. The basic format for a tag is a tag name surrounded by carets. So in this case, we're going to use the B tag, and it's surrounded by the carets, or the less than and the greater than symbols. Now this is just the start tag, the B start tag, and we need to give an end tag, which looks almost identical, but you know, we have the less than, but then we have a / which says this is the end tag, and the same name. The name has to match so that, you know, the computer knows that this one pairs with the first B tag, and then the other caret. So what happens is, when we save and refresh, we've wrapped the word world, and only the word world. If, whoops, I just deleted part of my tag here. If we add something else to our site here, because we have the start and the end tag, we're wrapping just the word world. So that's the general idea behind HTML, is that in itself is they're just tags. They're tags that disappear. You know, you don't see the B and the carets and all that. You know, the code. They disappear and they do something. They wrap the text and give it meaning. And so there's a lot of different, you know, reasons and ways that you use the HTML, and that's not what this video is about. It's just to kind of give you a very brief exposure to what that looks like. So every HTML document needs to have an HTML element, or tag rather. You know, HTML tag and HTML element are the same things. It's just the HTML items are each thing in HTML. The pair of starting and end create an item. So the HTML element is the root of every HTML document, and inside of that you have two first level tags, the head, and the body. So every website has the HTML, the head, and the body, and that's where these are the general placeholders for all the good stuff. Now normally you tab in every time you have a nesting meaning like a tag inside of a tag. You tab them in just to make it easier so you can recognize it. Now to get rid of, because the whole document is inside this HTML tag, I usually just leave those at the baseline to save some space. So inside the head you can put things like the title. This will appear, I don't know if you can see on my screen where it says page.html. Chrome does that as just a default placeholder, but that's where the page title would go. And here you can link to scripts and CSS style sheets that define how the page looks, and all kinds of other resources. Generally speaking, everything in the head is invisible. You won't see it. It's just configuration stuff and pointing at other files. And in the body is where we would put something like our hello world example. So we'll Control S and refresh, and nothing actually changes. It's just now we have a more well-formed document. The browser doesn't really need that stuff, and in fact fills it all in for us. But you definitely want to put certain things in the right spot. For example, we can create a style tag. A lot of times the CSS will be linked to in an external file, but we can put it for our practicing purposes in a style tag right here. So basically what happens with the style tag is that we convert from HTML syntax. We no longer write tags inside of the style tag. We've converted to what's called CSS, and it's a little bit different syntax. Basically what we do with CSS is we can target the HTML elements that we create. So for example, Michael's my name. I'm going to wrap it in a name tag. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so you can see that all on one line. Hello world, I'm Michael. Michael is now, we've defined it as a name, wrapping it in the name tag. When I first refresh, nothing happens. We haven't added any styles to the name. But if I select the name tag, all the name tags on the page, and say I want them to be orange, I can save this and refresh, and now you see that my name is orange. But if I say on another line, you are Joe. I don't know what your name is, but let's say your name was Joe. Whoops. Let's do a start here. Joe. I'm going to wrap this in a name tag because Joe is a name. And then we refresh the browser. You are Joe. And because we've said all name tags are supposed to be orange, Joe is also orange. Now you'll notice something funny going on here is that we put this way down here on another line, and it's all kind of mashed together up here. And this is a little bit hard to understand, and there's no great intuitive explanation for why this happens. It's frankly not intuitive, but white space, the white space is, when you hear the term white space, it refers to the space characters. This is actually a character, just like an A or a B. The space is an encoded character in the system. That's how it keeps track of where the spaces go. The tabs and the line returns are also white space. And so the white space usually just collapses down into a single space. And so all this white space here kind of doesn't exist. In fact, if you put a whole bunch of spaces inside or in between two words and refresh, I have a whole bunch of spaces in between U and R, and they don't show up because they all just collapse down into a single space. Okay, so you can put in a line break tag to take care of that, but usually speaking, you want to wrap your text in a container of some sort, A paragraph tag is a good way to do it. A paragraph tag will give you that the line breaks and give you some space below them. Usually you have to add that, but most sites will, if you have a series of paragraphs, you want to have a little bit of space in between them. You can control all of that. And so the P tag stands for the paragraph. There's several other predefined tags. By the way, name is not a predefined tag. I just made that one up. In fact, this could be like XYZ. And if we do a find and replace name with XYZ, replace all, save, refresh, it works the exact same way. Just showing that the tag name being name is completely arbitrary. It could be whatever you want. Now, making up your own tags is a little iffy. It doesn't work in older browsers, but I think most modern browsers you're fine doing that. In the old days, HTML was a little bit more strict and said you have to use the tags we give you, but the folks that create these standards are constantly changing their minds. In fact, the B tag that makes this bold is no longer recommended. They've changed the name of it to strong. It's supposed to be more meaningful and less style based, I guess. Again, won't get into that. It's kind of silly, but yeah. So we have here the beginnings of a decent document. Just to show you another tag here, we'll use a unordered list, a UL, and the UL has children of list items, and the list item can just have text or other elements inside of it. But the unordered list creates bullets, a bulleted list. So we'll save and refresh so you can see a bulleted list here. And with our CSS, to show you a few extra features of the CSS, there's several ways that you can target certain things. For example, if I wanted to target the XYZ tag that's inside of the P tag, in this case it's Joe, but it could be, other cases in which a XYZ tag appears inside of a P tag. You would do it like so. You'd say P space XYZ and then put your properties in curly braces after that. By the way, the general formula here for CSS is selector, and then in curly braces you put the properties. Each property is a name, the property name, and then the property value. And the syntax for these, you'll have to look them up and get familiar with them, but again, this is just a very quick, high-level, bird's eye overview of kind of how this stuff works. The CSS, and again, like I was just saying, the way that you need to think about the CSS is that you're defining these rules for, they apply to what's currently there, but they will apply to what might be there in the future. And so when you're making web pages, you always have to think about the manageability or the how this website is going to change in the future, because you're usually going to be adding more pages and more content, and you're creating tools for yourself, and you want your tools to be able to work in the future. And so setting up these selectors the right way to say, this, you can think of this as the computer says, give me every element on the page that meets this criteria, and that criteria in this case is it's a XYZ element that's inside of a P element. And you can have as many nestings as you want, like A, B, C, P, XYZ, as long as you had elements with those names. That's completely legit. So just to prove that this works, we're going to turn Joe to, we could override the color and make him blue and refresh, and Joe becomes blue. There's a whole set of properties for changing the font, for changing the padding and margins and borders and all kinds of stuff you can do with CSS, and we won't get into all the different CSS properties, but let's just say we want the background to be, I don't know, purple. Okay, so now because I changed that color override, the color goes back to orange, and now the background's purple. So that shows you how to do it. This is a parent-child selector pattern. You just use a space between them. Now one thing that we can do is, let's say we wanted all of our list items to be font weight bold. Control save, refresh, they all become bold. So, as you can see, if there's lots of LIs on the page, it selects all of them, as we would expect. But let's say one of them was special, and we wanted to say, do something specifically to this one. Let's say we wanted to put a class of second on here, just to have the second list item. We could apply this class. By the way, this is called an attribute. The attribute is a name and a value with the value in quotations. And you can have as many attributes on an element as you want. So the class is specific to CSS. JavaScript can use it as well, and you do use similar selectors in your JavaScript as well when you want to go and manipulate or do something with an element that you've declared in your HTML document. JavaScript is for behaviors and that sort of a thing. I can make another video about that later. But essentially what we want to do here with this CSS class is, well, whatever we want, frankly. If we wanted to make the second list item here, let's say we wanted to put some padding and a border on there. You might not know what I mean yet, but you'll soon see. We want the list item here. Well, first we'll just do simple class. Any element, no matter what the element is, if it has the class of second, which is these without any dot in front of it, all these selectors we've used so far mean elements, meaning that selects item with the tag name of whatever we specify. Now if we put a period in front of it, that is the CSS syntax for a class selector. So this dot second here means select any element that has the class of second on it, including this one. And so if we want the class of second to mean, I said padding, we'll go 10 pixels of padding and add a border of, let's just say, 2 pixels solid green, and refresh the browser. Now this has some padding on it, which is the space inside, and also a border of green. Okay, and so we could also add this to Joe. Let's say Joe wanted to be, he was the second tag XYZ. We'll put the second class on there. He gets padding and the border as well. Now notice, because he has a background of purple, the whole background gets a little bit bigger as well. So all these CSS classes kind of stack on top of each other, and there's essentially the whole way CSS works is it's a whole series of overrides, meaning if you were, we saw earlier that you could override the color of the text. The way the overrides work is based on the order that they're defined in, but also this tricky thing called specificity, meaning how specific is the selector. The more specific it is, the more likely it is to override a property. And just Google CSS specificity if you want to learn more about that. It's a little bit of a tricky thing, but you don't run into it until you start getting a lot of crazy stuff going on. But yeah, so we can apply this class of second to any element, and it will inherit this these properties. Now what we can do is we can create very complex selectors. Like if we wanted only list items with the class of second to have, I don't know, I've already used up a lot of what I can think. We'll just say margin left of 100 pixels. You'll see, it should move this thing over. Whoops. Refresh the wrong window. There we go. It added 100 pixels to the left of this item. But the point here is that the we're using the class of second, but in combination with the element li. So we say li dot second, and notice you couldn't do second li. If you did that, it would mean something completely different because of the dot is the separator. You can't put the li on the end here because that means the class of secondly. Yeah, so it's got to be element first, then the dot. Yeah, you can also use IDs in addition to class equals something. You can say ID equals something. Now the ID is just like a class in most regards, except you can only have one ID. Like the ID needs to be unique. So for example, the ID of something could not also be on another element. The world won't come to an end. The page will still probably work, unless you're doing something specific with that selector. But just so you know, to select an ID like that, you would use the pound sign, this little number sign here, to just like the class, just precedes it. You could say like li with the ID of something, but that's really redundant and unnecessary because it's only on one element anyway, so it has to be an li in this case. But yeah, the ID of something, we could use that to override and say font style italic. Actually, that's not an override, that's just adding it. It's bold and italic. Okay, so we've covered class selectors, element selectors, ID selectors. There's a bunch of other funny stuff you'll see with selectors, and they get, if you read the CSS on a normal web page, they get pretty long and fairly complex depending on what's going on. But the general idea is that these get loaded into the computer's memory, and if it's in the head, usually before any of the stuff even loads. And then this is kind of like the guidelines for how the browser decides to render anything. In fact, if new content is added to the page while the page is, if you have a real-time site, anything that gets added to the page all these styles get applied to it. So it's kind of like a living, breathing styling system that applies all of these styles to the elements that you have, which is nice. So yeah, you're kind of creating your tools and using these tools to create content, and there's a lot more to CSS. Positioning and CSS is a nightmare. I could make a whole video about positioning. I could probably make 100 videos about positioning, and really I don't understand it fully myself, and I really don't like it. They've come up with a new thing called Flexbox that is supposed to solve some of those problems, and frankly I'm not particularly impressed with it. It's a little bit better and solves some problems, but still is not really intuitive, and for new people coming in and trying to learn it, it's a little just as complex and intimidating as the last system. So yeah, a lot of stuff I don't like about it, but what I wanted to try and do is make it fairly simple and just kind of in one fell swoop give you a pretty quick and pretty deep overview of quite a few of the features of HTML and CSS. And if you have watched this and sleep on it, tomorrow you'll be much better off to try and tackle some of the more complicated features with a little bit of exposure. And so I hope I accomplished that. Feel free to ask any questions. I'd love to help out. Thanks for watching.